Hello everyone, my name is Saad Rumani and I am a student doing my Masters in Engineering Management at King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals in Saudi Arabia. This video is about an overview of the article named Environmental and Social Supply Chain Management Sustainability Practices from the journal Production Planning and Control. As we all know, in recent times, organizations are required to incorporate both social and environmental factors into their supply chain. Previously, majority of research was mainly based on economic factors and a very few of them focused on social and environmental factors. So in this paper, we are going to conceptualize and operationalize the concept of supply chain management sustainability practices based on a multi-stage procedure involving a literature review, expert Q-sort, and pre-test process, pilot test, and survey of 156 supply chain directors and managers in Ireland. By doing this, we would be able to develop a multidimensional conceptualization and measure of social and environmental supply chain management sustainability practices. So these are the topics that would be covered throughout the video. We will begin with introduction, then we'll go to theoretical framework and construct development. This basically means a literature review of the article. Then we'll move on to the methodology followed, and then we'll look into the analysis and findings, and eventually we'll end up by discussion and conclusion. As mentioned earlier, previously very few research has been performed to develop comparable environmental and social supply chain sustainability, which can also be used to explain the integration of two. This paper develops constructs and measures that address both environmental and social aspects of sustainability at a supply chain level. It uncovers multiple practices at supply chain level, and then we uncover these models. It then tests each of these models to uncover the most reliable supply chain sustainability practice measure. The paper is organized as follows: outline the theoretical framework and development of constructs, methods used for testing each of the models, and analysis of the result is then followed by discussion of the implications of the research and conclusion. So to begin with our literature review, we come to know that firms have added a competitive advantage if they have a unique resource. These resources should help to solve problems, sense opportunities and threats, make market-oriented decisions, and change a firm's resource base. Studies have shown that supply management practices, and in particular relational supply management practices, are strongly related to competitive advantage, even more so than research and development and human capital. Many studies use sustainability as a single concept incorporating both environmental and social sustainability. There is evidence that this does not happen in practice. There are fundamental differences between environmental and social supply chain sustainability practices, especially in terms of their focus. Environmental practices focus on resource use and impacts on the physical environment, whereas social practices focus on health and well-being of people in the supply chain and impacts on society. It has been suggested that all environmental benefits are also social benefits, that any practice can prevent harm to the environment ultimately benefits the population of the earth and can therefore be combined into one construct. The paper proposes several practices identified in the literature and examine if one, two, or multiple practice concepts work better. In addition, we can also propose green products and process development, lean and green operations, remanufacturing or recycling, and closed loop systems. To continue on our previous statement, we would like to begin with basic practices at an organizational level of pollution, prevention, and eco-efficiency through advanced practices, including redesigning supply chain processes around environmental goals and the reuse or recycling of materials and resources throughout the supply chain. For the final stage, industry ecosystems, The supply chain redefines itself as a closed system using its waste material as raw materials to be processed and used as the beginning of the next production process. This model is based on one industry and is insightful in setting up the foundation of a model that can be used across multiple industries. However, this does not cover other factors like the cost to firm. So in this case of supply chain, the cost can be shared. This would help develop better relations, which would in turn effectively generate new markets for products or supply chain. Another way is to propose an environmental sustainability two-factor model based on the collaborative paradigm, monitoring and collaborating for environmental supply chain sustainability practices. Monitoring is auditing suppliers' sustainability practices and ensuring that suppliers adopt environmental management systems. Collaboration is the ability to work with suppliers to develop environmental practices that will bring advantage to the firm. These models are a great step forward in understanding supply chain sustainability practices and for emphasizing the relational practices. The picture below is the theoretical framework for environmental and social supply chain sustainability practices which was developed after the literature review was done. It shows us that environmental process practices focus on monitoring the suppliers' practices and policies and implementing environmental system with suppliers. This can be done by means of questionnaires, site visits, auditing, etc. Certain certifications like the LEED or the ISO certificate helps not only in assessing and evaluating supplier environmental performance but also ensuring that practices are consistent and up to date. This is the second part is the market-based practices. This is achieved by producing green products. These business models are usually more strategic in nature. It includes making products from recycled materials. Coming to the social aspects of process-based practices, it includes health and safety requirements and audits of suppliers. Example, regulation of child labor, forced labor, or working practices. Socially sustainable management system implementation involves introducing management system with suppliers that provide policies and procedures for fair wages, working hours, autonomous work practices, and effective job design to minimize stress. Coming to the last part of the picture, that is the market-based practices of a social market-based practices. These include producing new products with suppliers to ensure fair margins and worker welfare, that is, develop products or processes that ensure increasing the health and safety of workers and the consumers as well, and also to provide fair margins to suppliers. Now coming to the methodology followed in the case. In this research, supply chain relationship was used as the unit of analysis. A survey was done by questioning a local company about their relationship with their supplier. The person in charge or with the most knowledge of supply chains is selected to complete the questionnaire. The target sample covered 10 industries in Ireland based on the North American Industry Classification System of 2007, also known as NAICS. The table below, you can see all the 10 industries which are covered. A randomized list of 1000 companies was drawn from the database. The companies selected had to comply with three main conditions: adherence to the listed NAICS specifications, a minimum of 50 employees, that is, it cannot be a small scale industry or a company, and information on job titles was supplied. The questionnaire respondents were basically CEO, which comprised of 0.64%, supply chain directors, which comprised of 8.33%, Supply chain logistics purchasing managers, who comprise the most of 51.92%, and the rest operational managers, functional managers, which comprised of 39.11%. The response rate was 18.08% with 156 complete responses from diverse industries. The reduction in number was because of various factors like no longer trading, no response, company policies which include confidentiality, and lack of time. The measuring development used in this case is as follows. A rigorous process of measurement development began with items used to measure supply chain sustainability practices adapted from a variety of previous studies. Environmental monitoring and social monitoring were adapted from the Global Manufacturing Research Group (GMRG) questionnaire, including questions on monitoring compliance, commitment, and audits of environmental and health and safety practices after advice in the QSOT. GMRG provided items in relation to key suppliers and supply certifications. Measures were tested in 4 groups. As a method of assuring domain and content validity, 2 independent rounds of QSOT took place. Pre-testing was done by a group of professors and senior sustainable supply chain management lecturers. Then, 43 items were chosen at first for constructs. After refinement and second round of QSOT, 32 items remained. Finally, a pilot test was done to ensure reliability and new measures. Experts had to categorize the items between the 8 constructs with 80% agreement as the acceptable rate for verified measures. The average number of correct responses was 64%. The image which you see below on the left hand side of the slide is just an example of QSOT where the user participant gives his viewpoint for any issue or study. Coming to the analysis and findings part of this case, an examination of the measurement structure of the environmental and supply chain sustainability practices using a confirmatory factor analysis was done. For both measures, we examined 4 alternative measurement model configurations. A one-factor model in which the 16 items loaded on a single factor. An independent 4-factor model in which each item loaded on its respective factor, that is monitoring, management systems, new product and process development, redefinition, and in which the correlation among the factors were constrained to be 0. That is, these were independent models. The 4-factor correlated models were basically not independent, so the correlation among the factors were free to vary, and the item loaded on its respective factors. Lastly, a hypothesized second-order one-factor model in which the 4 supply chain practices loaded on a single higher-order factor, representing a latent supply chain sustainable practice. In evaluating the fit of the alternative model configurations, we examined the chi-square, the comparative fit index, the incremental fit index, the Tucker-Lewis index, the root mean square error of approximation, and the archaic information criterion. In this video, we would be comparing only the chi-square method. The below table is the environmental supply chain practices results. As the previous table showed us the environmental supply chain sustainability practices, this table now will show us the social supply chain sustainability practices. The model statistics suggests that the one-factor model and the independent factor model do not adequately fit the data, as evidenced by the large chi-square statistic and low baseline comparison indices. The adequate fit of the one-factor model is consistent with our expectation that supply chain sustainability practices are multidimensional. Similarly, the inadequacy of the independent four model suggests some level covariance among the four factors. The correlated four-factor model represents the best fit for the sample data, as it has got the lowest chi-square value. Coming to the last part of our video, we would like to discuss and finally conclude. So to begin with the discussion, this paper intended to develop constructs and measures for sustainable supply chain management practices, both environmental and social, to be used for research into supply chain sustainability. Number of constructs, measures, and items were developed. After the literature review and QSOT constructs were developed which tested for reliability, validity, and unidimensionality. Although we initially separated monitoring and management systems into two, it can be aggregated into one construct. This is especially helpful for managers trying to identify different types of social and environmental supply chain practices they use, such as monitoring the different criterias and also engaging environmental and social sustainability management systems, and also to encourage those that benefit the environment and society by promoting these factors. This paper contributes to the growing awareness of sustainability practices that differentiate between activities that limit harm. Finally, the paper contributes to the growing theory of sustainable supply chains by proposing and testing new constructs of environmentally and socially sustainable supply chain management practices. To proceed further in this domain, we could conduct further research which could include by reducing the impact of common method bias by including both buyers and suppliers in the study, as in this case we have included only suppliers. We can also perform this at multiple levels in the supply chain. This could also be augmented by gathering data from multiple sources within each organization to increase the validity of the data. So that's it from my side. Thank you for being patient listeners. I hope the video was informative.